Which college is this? Oh, wait, show some other college. Okay, is this MCKV West Bengal? Are you able to hear me? Raise your hands. Yes, thank you. I'm glad that I'm reaching you. Okay, let's begin our session today. We are a little delayed because we took some time to set all this up. What is our agenda for today? So I am repeating from what we had said in the beginning of these sessions, but I'm only going to tell you what is our agenda for today. So yesterday we explained the rectifying operation of a p-n junction. So today we are going to explain the amplifying operation of a transistor, bipolar and MOS without using equations or energy band diagram. Then we shall explain the features and utility of the energy band diagram of a semiconductor. Then we'll write and explain the equations based on drift diffusion carrier transport that are employed to model solid state device. State some standard approximations employed to simplify the solution of the above equations. And finally, state how to check and remember a device model equation and what precautions should be taken while making calculations with it. So all of you are going to do some calculations today in the last half an hour of our session. So please have your calculators by your side. Let me begin with a question which was emailed to me by Professor R.S. Rao from ECE department, MITS, Madanapalle. So the question is, in the first session you told no energy is required for electron to fall into a hole. My point is, energy is not required, but energy gets released during recombination. Kindly throw some light on this aspect. Now look at this picture that I had shown you, right, in the early stages of this particular session. You can see here that there are arrows showing generation. So when you see an arrow between a hole and an electron directed from the hole to the electron, it means it is generation. And an electron, an arrow from electron to hole is recombination. So this diagram here shows generation and recombination. Now you see, what is the difference between recombination and hole movement? This is important point. During recombination, a free electron is jumping into a vacancy or a hole. At that time energy is released. It is correct. But how do you move a hole? Suppose for example you are talking about the hole here that is generated. How will it move? It will move when an electron from a neighboring silicon-silicon bond jumps into this vacancy. Okay, so the difference between hole movement and recombination we must recognize. During hole movement, a bonded electron or valence electron is jumping into a vacancy. That electron is nearby the vacancy. So not much energy is required for this. In fact, the process by which the bonded electron moves into the vacancy is tunneling. It is almost at the same energy. But during recombination, a free electron jumps into a hole. Therefore, a lot of energy is released, energy equal to the bond energy of the silicon atom. Now, before I proceed further, I want to bring to your notice that many of these questions will be answered if you also see my video lectures. So I have 3 sets of video lectures on the internet. First set of video lectures are solid state devices, the basics of solid state devices. This is NPTEL video lecture. It is available at this website, and its transcripts are also available at the website. You can see these websites through the slides which will be put up on the QEEE website. Then we also have an advanced course called Semiconductor Device Modeling. It is available at this particular website. So these two, solid state devices and semiconductor device modeling, are NPTEL video lectures. Then there is also a series of lectures on introduction to research, everything about research, why people should do research, how people should do research, and so on. So all about research. This is available at the website given below. Okay. Now you can browse through these courses at your leisure to get more information. Now let me recapitulate what we did in the operation of a p-n junction, so that I can then build up from there and discuss how bipolar junction transistor works. So we explained the operation of a p-n junction as follows. Under equilibrium, a space charge region is created. In this space charge region, the drift and diffusion are in exact balance. Forward bias. In forward bias, what we said is a large current flows because P region injects holes into N region, and these holes inject into N region, diffuse and recombine. This injection happens because in forward bias, diffusion dominates over drift in this space charge region. Similarly, electrons diffuse from N to P and they recombine in the P region. Now, because the source of holes in P region is large and the source of electrons in N region is large, therefore you have a large current. Starting from here, we can build up the operation of the bipolar transistor. Now here is the structure of the bipolar transistor. What is there here? You have a forward bias p-n junction placed in close proximity to a reverse biased, a zero biased p-n junction. Zero bias means shorted. You can see that this p-n junction is shorted and this p-n junction is forward biased. So let me draw that on the board. So you have one p-n junction and another p-n junction brought in close proximity. This is forward biased and this is zero bias, shorted. The transistor action actually comes from interaction between these two junctions, a forward bias junction and a zero bias junction. So let us see what is going to happen. The currents are shown here. You have an emitter current, base current and collector current. We need to understand how these emitter, base and collector currents are set up inside the device. So based on our understanding of p-n junction, we know that this is a forward bias p-n junction. So P region will inject holes into N region and N region will inject electrons into P region. The injected electrons will recombine with holes, and now these holes which are injected from P to N, they will recombine in the N region. However, in contrast to a p-n junction, in this case you find another arrow here. That is, a set of holes are moving from the N region to P region, and that is what is responsible for the collector current. Now how do you get this whole current? So here let us show this. P plus N P, P region is injecting holes and they are recombining. If this N region is very close, this junction, this is called the collector junction and this is called the emitter junction. So if the collector junction is very close to the emitter junction, then amount of recombination in N region is small. So this current is very small as compared to the current injected. Therefore, some holes will remain and they are going to cross over to the P region. Right? So that is how you are getting this current, which then flows out of the terminal. And smaller the distance between the emitter and collector junction, smaller this recombination and greater this current. So that is the difference between a simple p-n junction and the p-n junction here, very near which another junction is there, right? So recombination in the N region is reduced, therefore most of the holes which are injected, they cross over to P region. Now that is how you get this whole current here. Needless to say, this whole current recombines with electrons. Therefore, this base current is because of electrons. Now you can see that the base current is outward because the electrons are moving in. So from this terminal you need electrons for recombining here, and then you also need electrons for recombining in the emitter. So sum of these two electron currents is the base current. This is conventional current, so its direction is opposite to that of electrons, right? So that is what is happening here. So you have electrons and electrons injected across the forward bias junction here. They recombine with holes like this. So these are electrons, and therefore you have electrons moving in like this. This electron current is nothing but a conventional current in the downward direction. So that is how you are getting currents in the bipolar transistor. We really want this distance to be small. This is called base width. Now how small should the base width be? How small should the base width be so that we cut down the complete recombination here and get this entire current across to the collector? This base width, let us show it by the symbol WB, should be much less than what is called diffusion length of holes. So the P region is injecting holes into N region and these holes are diffusing while recombining. So to what distance do the holes diffuse before recombining? That distance is called diffusion length. The distance to which the holes move in the N region before they recombine. So if you keep the width of this region much less than diffusion length, most of them will not recombine, right? And therefore most of them will remain and they will cross over into this region. Now you will ask, how can they cross over across the junction? Will the junction not prevent? Now this is what is clear from here. Please see the direction of the built-in field. You know that from our discussion of PN junction, even if the junction is zero biased, there is a built-in electric field, okay, and that is directed from N to P because of the space charge region. So this direction of the electric field is such that it will move the holes from left to right, and that is how the holes are able to cross over from the base to the collector. So that is a transistor action. You can see here IC, collector current, is alpha times IE. IE is the emitter current. So let us see what is this alpha. So let us start from the emitter. The emitter is injecting some current, that is holes. Part of the holes are recombining with electrons here injected from the N region, and remaining is getting injected. Part of that is recombining in the base and the remaining holes are reaching here. Now this part is really very, very small because we want to keep the base width very small, and this part also is very small because it is because of electrons in the heavily doped P region, and electrons are minority carriers. So both these currents are small, therefore most of the emitter current is transferred to collector. You can see the emitter current is lost here partly and lost here partly, and remaining is crossing over here. So this alpha is very close to 1, but it is less than 1. That is what is said here in the slide. Almost the entire current through the forward bias junction can be transferred to a nearby zero biased or shorted junction located less than a diffusion length away from the former junction. Now to give you some feel what kind of diffusion lengths can be there and what should be the base width. So the base width is generally less than 1 micrometer. Diffusion length may be of the order of 15 to even 30 or 40 micrometers. So base width is of the order of 1 micrometer or less. How much is 1 micrometer? 1 micrometer, your hair is about 40 micrometers. Diameter of the hair is 40 microns. So 1 by 40 times the thickness or diameter of the hair. That is the base width. It is really very, very small. When you have such a base width, then your alpha will be close to 1 and almost the entire emitter current will be transferred to the collector. Now let us explain, if you have a device like this, how it is going to give rise to amplification. Now when we talk about amplification, we must always remember we talk about small signal amplification. So we are talking about small signal amplification. That means we apply an AC voltage and or an AC current, and we want that current, AC current or voltage, to be amplified. So at the input, if I have a voltage like this as a function of time, somewhere at the output terminal I should get a voltage which is maybe like this, which is much more. This is V out as a function of time, or this could be a current, and we want this also to be a current. So that is the kind of amplification we are talking about, not DC amplification. Now let us see how we can get amplification. Now suppose I pass this collector current through a resistor to tap power out of this. So I will convert this current into a voltage by passing it through a resistor. What is going to happen? So you see that moment I put a resistor here, a polarity of voltage is going to develop like this, positive on the P and negative on the N, because the current is passing through this resistance. Now that voltage will come across the collector and base, and voltage is equal to IC into R. IC is the current that is passing through the resistance, and this is the polarity of the voltage. Now this polarity of the voltage is going to spoil our transistor action. What was the transistor action? The transistor action was that entire emitter current is transferred to the collector, almost the entire emitter current. So I'm going back to the previous slide. Transistor action is contained in this term alpha. The collector current transferred from the emitter is alpha times IE, and we want this alpha very close to 1 so that almost the entire current is transferred. Now at this point let me explain to you why the device is called a transistor. I had already mentioned this in the first session. I am repeating it here. Transfer resistor. You can see that the current is being transferred from a forward bias junction which has a low resistance to a zero bias junction which has a high resistance, right? So it is transfer of current from a low resistance to a high resistance. So this junction has low resistance because it is forward biased, but this zero biased, so its resistance is higher. So transfer of current from low resistance to high resistance. So that is why it is transfer resistor. And now you remove these terms, it becomes transistor. So transistor, right? You combine these two. That is how the name transistor has come. Okay, let us return to our discussion of amplification. So for good transistor action, we will need the alpha here to be close to 1. Now what is happening when you put the resistor here is that your junction here, this is called collector to base junction. This terminal is collector, this terminal is emitter, and this is base, right? This is collector junction and this is emitter junction. Okay, so again if this gets forward bias, what is going to happen? P region is going to inject holes into N region. Now this whole current which is injected, and forward bias means a high current. So a large number of holes are going to get injected from P to N if forward bias is present, and this injected current will oppose or nullify this whole current which was there because of transistor action coming from the emitter. And if you sum these two currents up, your current is going to become very, very small because one is opposing the other. In other words, the collector current will become really very small. We want the collector current to be approximately equal to emitter current. But what has happened because of forward biasing of this junction is that the collector current has become very small, transistor action has got destroyed. That is why I am not able to convert this collector current to a voltage by passing through a resistor. What is the way out? So let us put that down in words here. The voltage drop across the resistor forward biases the collector base junction, causing injection of holes from collector to base, killing the current IC and hence the tap power. So we are not able to tap any power here. So what do we do? Now this is the thing we do. What we do is we put in another voltage, right? A power supply. What is the role of this power supply? It will oppose the voltage drop across the resistor. In the resistor, voltage drop was in this direction. This was positive and this was negative. Power supply, this is positive, this is negative. If I sum up these two, which is equal to VC minus ICR. Okay. Let me show that here. So the IC is flowing like this, and this is your IC into R, and this is in this direction. So the two are opposing each other, right, and they are cancelling. So now if I adjust my VC so that this VC is equal to ICR, I will again get back a zero biased junction, and then my alpha will become very close to 1, the entire current will get transferred. Now unfortunately I cannot always maintain the VC to be equal to ICR, because the collector current will change when I change the emitter base voltage. And just now we said our amplification is a small signal amplification, which means I am going to vary my emitter to base voltage, that is my input, right. So here I am going to vary the emitter base voltage. How do I vary the emitter base voltage? I can, for example, put a small signal source here. So this voltage will vary the current here. This voltage will vary the current, forward bias current here, and therefore transferred current to the collector also will vary, and IC therefore will vary in response to this voltage, right. Therefore, but this power supply is a constant power supply, it's a DC power supply. So it is very difficult for me to constantly adjust this power supply so that it cancels this voltage. Then what is the way out? The way out is VC minus ICR. I have to accept either a positive value of this difference or a negative value, which means I have to accept either a forward bias across this junction or a reverse bias. Which is better? You can easily show that a reverse bias is better. I am okay with accepting a reverse bias because it is shown here, if the collector to base junction is reverse biased, the only addition to the current is the current shown here, which is the reverse current of the diode. We had discussed the reverse current of a PN junction in reverse bias. So that current is really very small. So reverse bias current which is shown here is very, very small, and therefore it does not affect your collector current. And this is what is shown here, your current is now alpha IE plus I naught, and this I naught is very small, therefore IC is approximately alpha IE. As compared to this, if you had a forward bias, which is what was shown in the previous slide, here if you have a forward bias, then a large number of holes are injected from P to N, and this hole current opposes this hole current, and therefore the current is drastically cut down. Whereas if it is reverse biased, which is what is shown here, because of the application of this VC, there is a current, but this current is very, very small, reverse bias current is very small, and therefore the transferred current here from emitter is not disturbed very much, and you get the collector current as alpha IE plus I naught. Now you are able to tap almost the entire IC with alpha close to 1 across this resistor, right, and therefore you can now get an amplification. Let us see how. Suppose I make a change in VEB, delta VEB, right, let us say this is delta VEB change, then I will get a change in the current, so delta IC, and therefore I will get a change in the voltage across this, that will be R into delta IC. Now if this R into delta IC is much more than delta VEB, then I have got an amplification of voltage. So I have to look at the ratio R delta IC by delta VEB. If this is much greater than 1, then I have amplification. So what amplification is it? If it is voltage amplification, right? Let us see, how can I get this much greater than 1? Now you know the equation of the current in a diode, okay? This is delta I. What is the equation for the current IE? The equation for the current is IE is equal to some reverse saturation current into exponential of V by Vt minus 1. All of you know this is the equation for diode, forward current. And this delta IC is nothing but alpha times delta IE. So we are trying to explain this small signal amplification. So this delta IC is alpha times delta IE. So I will replace this by alpha times delta IE. So really I have to find out what is delta IE by delta VB. How much is this? And then compare with R. So let me write that here, R into alpha, which is very close to 1. This quantity is close to 1. Divided by delta VB by delta IE. That is also a resistance, delta VB by delta IE. So I should compare this resistance R with the small signal resistance of the diode. That is a transfer resistor, right? The current is being transferred from a small resistance to a larger resistance. So this is the small resistance. How much is this? Now this is your equation for IE as a function of, this is VEB. So IE versus VEB, this is your equation. From here I can find out delta VEB by delta IE. How much is it? Let us differentiate this. So I get, here itself if I write, delta IE is equal to I naught E exponential of VEB by VT into delta VEB, if I differentiate this. Now if my VEB is much more than VT, this quantity is much more than 1. So I can simply neglect this one. That means this quantity is nothing but IE. Therefore I can write delta IE is equal to IE into delta VEB. So delta IE is equal to IE. Now I should also include the VT. So delta VEB by VT. When I differentiate this, delta IE is equal to I naught E into exponential VB by VT into delta VB by VT. So from here I can get delta IE by delta VEB, and that is what is written here. From here I get delta VEB by delta IE is equal to VT by IE. That is what I get by differentiating this diode equation. So I can substitute this VT by IE here. I will get this equal to alpha times R by VT by IE. If I push this IE up, it is alpha into RIE by VT. Now let us put some typical values of resistors and current IE and see how much is this value. So for R equal to 1 kilo ohm, IE equal to say 1 milliampere, R into IE will be equal to 1 volt. How much is VT? VT is 0.026 volts at 300 K. So when I take a ratio, I should take a ratio of 1 volt to 0.026 here. So this is equal to alpha into 1 by 0.026. How much is this? I can roughly take this to be 0.025 for making a simple calculation, and I will remove this. This will be 1000. So 1000 by 25, which is equal to 40 times alpha. So this is my voltage gain. And we are talking about small signal amplification. So this is small signal voltage gain. Small signal voltage gain is 40 times alpha. Normally in a bipolar transistor, alpha is very close to 1. It may be 0.98, 0.99, something like that, right? Even more than that, 0.995. So I can simply assume this to be 1 and I am getting a gain of 40. So you see how transistor is giving rise to a voltage gain of 40. Let us go through this explanation again, how the voltage gain is happening. So this is your transistor. The V, let me remove this nomenclature so that it is clear. So I apply a VEB to this forward bias junction, to this junction. So VEB forward bias is this junction. As a result of which a current IE flows. Almost the entire current IE is transferred to IC. IC is alpha times IE. So this current is holes, some recombines, some gets injected here, and since this region is very thin, nothing recombines, almost nothing recombines, everything injects here, and that current is available as IC. Okay, you are passing this IC across the resistor and you are getting a voltage drop across this, that is R, alpha R into IE. It is R into IC, but IC is alpha times IE. So that is your voltage drop here. Now you are going to compare this voltage with this voltage. This is the input voltage, this is your output voltage. But we always talk of small signal amplification. We always want to amplify varying signals, time varying signals. So rather than talk about VEB, we talk about delta VEB, change in VEB. And therefore here we talk about change in IE because of change in VEB. So when you change VEB, IE will change, IC also will change, and this will change. So I am going to replace it by delta IE. Now you are going to compare this and this, and as we have shown by calculation here, this divided by this is much more than 1. We have got about 40, value of about 40. If I choose R of 1 kilo ohm, R is 1 kilo ohm, and it is room temperature 300 K, and if the current IE is 1 milliampere DC current. So actually the transistor action, if I want to summarize, I will show it as follows. So this is DC VEB, this is delta VEB superimposed over VEB. As a result, your current is IE plus delta IE. And this current is IC plus delta IC. So IC is because of IE, IE is because of VEB. Delta VEB is causing delta IE, that is causing delta IC, right? And here therefore your voltage drop is IC R plus delta IC into R. This delta IC into R we are writing as alpha delta IE into R. Now I compare this with this. This is very large compared to this. That is how I get voltage amplification. And why is this power supply required? I should ensure this voltage amplification I will get only if this is a zero bias junction. If it becomes forward biased, then the collector current is destroyed. Okay, but I cannot ensure constant zero bias all the time because this voltage is varying, right? If this voltage varies like this voltage is also vary like this, but this is a constant voltage. So I cannot maintain a constant voltage across this, but forward bias destroys the current. So I accept reverse bias because reverse bias current across this junction is very, very small. It does not affect the transistor action. So that is the role of this VC. It is to maintain this junction always reverse biased or at most zero biased. Okay. At this point I want to pause and ask if there are any doubts. MCKV, West Bengal. What is the doubt? Somebody raised a hand. Somebody has a doubt.
Yeah, that.
Please tell me your name.
Yeah, will you please repeat that thing that Devaruti Bandyopadhyay?
Pardon, what is the first name?
Devaruti.
Devaruti, okay. Bolun.
Will you please repeat that thing, how it is coming that 40% of alpha, that voltage signal, small signal voltage amplification, gain I mean.
Oh, you mean, no, not 40% of alpha, 40 into alpha, 40 times alpha.
Okay. Will you please repeat that?
You mean how do you get that 40 into alpha? You are asking me how do you get 40 times alpha?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. First of all, we are talking of small signal amplification, right? You understood that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, second thing is, when we talk of small signal, that means we are, so to find out the small signal current because of small signal voltage here, I should use the diode law. IE is equal to reverse saturation current of the emitter junction into VEB by VT minus 1. Did you understand this equation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, so based on this equation, if I want to know how much change in IE will be there because of change in VEB, why do we take changes? Because we want small signal amplification. You understand that if I want small signal amplification, I should talk about small changes. Is that clear to you?
Yes.
Okay. So now, if you calculate delta IE for delta VEB or a change in delta VEB, what is delta IE? Then you differentiate this. Now this turns out to be approximately equal to IE by VT. Is this clear? When you differentiate this, you get this. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then it is not so difficult at all. Now, what is the voltage across the resistor? What is the small signal voltage across this resistor? It is R into delta IC. Is that clear?
Yes.
You have a problem here? No. Is this clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I must compare R into delta IC. That is my output voltage. I am taking the output from here. And I should compare delta VEB. Right? Ratio of R into delta IC by delta VEB is the gain, voltage gain. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, then let us take the ratio. Now what is delta IC? Delta IC is nothing but alpha times delta IE, because IC is obtained from IE. So I will replace delta IC by alpha into delta IE. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, so I should take ratio of this to delta VEB. Clear?
Yes.
Okay, now but delta IE by delta VEB is IE by VT by differentiating this. So this is equal to R into alpha into IE by VT. This is clear?
Yes.
Now suppose now we take some typical values which we use in practice. So resistance is 1 kilo ohm. Supposing I choose 1 kilo ohm resistance. Then emitter current, I take 1 milliampere, right?
Okay.
1 milliampere. So how much is 1 kilo ohm into 1 milliampere? It is 1 volt. Okay. So this is alpha into 1 volt numerator. Now what is denominator? VT. VT at 300K is 0.026 electron volt. Clear? 0.026 volts.
Yes.
Correct. So what is 1 by 0.026? I said I will approximate 0.026 as 0.025 so that I will get a simple ratio, approximate answer. So 1 volt by 0.026 volts, it is approximately 40, close to 40. Clear?
Okay.
That is why
Yeah.
this This is approximately equal to 40 times alpha. Now alpha is very close to 1. We have explained why alpha is close to 1. Did you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So now that is how you get 40 into alpha. This is about 40. So this is about 40. So you are getting a gain of 40. So because of changing the delta VEB, you are getting a change here in voltage that is 40 times more than this voltage. That is the amplification. Is that clear to you?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now we will skip any further explanation because we have understood the essential of amplification. Okay. Now from here, how do you get these characteristics from this understanding? Now I will not spend time on this because our session time is limited. Okay, you can try it yourself. In fact, this is explained in the books. Based on the explanation that I have given of how this transistor operates, you can easily figure out. If you spend about an hour or so, you will understand how we generate these characteristics. So I will go to the metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. Let us explain very simply how this device works. So far we have explained how bipolar junction transistor works and how it gives rise to amplification. Now we will explain MOSFET. So let us begin with this picture here of a PN junction. What is shown here is an N plus type polysilicon in junction with a P type bulk or substrate. As we have discussed already, you will have a space charge region in a PN junction. I have shown the junction shorted, right? So N region is shorted to P, zero bias. Even zero bias, you have a built-in space charge region, electric field and potential. That is what is shown here. The N side is positively charged because ionized donors, P side is ionized acceptors. Now, we have shown the depletion region on the N side to be very, very thin because this is heavily doped. So most of the depletion region is on the P side. Now suppose we introduce an oxide in between, something like this, between N plus region and P region. What is going to happen? What is going to happen is this depletion region is going to shrink, okay, because of this presence of the oxide in between. Because the potential drop between N and P, the built-in potential should be the same. And now you have, let me show that on the board. So this is N plus P junction and you have a built-in potential like this. This is psi naught, let us say. If you introduce an oxide like this in between, your built-in potential still has to remain same because it only depends on doping in N plus and P. But the width of the depletion region here should decrease because the same potential now has to fall across a longer length because you introduce the oxide thickness. So therefore, the result of this is that your depletion region will now be smaller, but you will have a depletion region here. If your oxide thickness is 0, it is corresponding to an N plus P junction. Okay. Introduce an oxide, a thin oxide, a depletion region here will shrink. Okay. Let us proceed further now. Suppose I apply a voltage here instead of a zero bias. I am now applying a voltage. This voltage is such that N side is positive with respect to P, but there is an oxide in between. Evidently what is going to happen is this field shown here is going to increase because I applied a voltage in which N is positive, P is negative. So as compared to the built-in situation, now you have more field and therefore your depletion region will expand. That is what is written here. The depletion region expands on the application of a small VGB. Let me show this simply as in this slide, okay. So here I had shown it as a complete circuit diagram here. Since I am going to add more features to the diagram, I want to make the diagram simple. So I want to remove this wire, right. from the diagram, but I have to apply the voltage. So that is the same thing is shown here in a simple way. This is shown as grounded and this is shown as a point to which a VGB is applied. Okay. Now let me increase the VGB. Now what is going to happen? Look at this. The depletion region has expanded further, but in addition another region has come with negative sign. It has been shown. This is region of electrons. This region which was shown with a negative sign but with circles around it is a depletion region. It is obtained because of ionized acceptor impurities, and these impurities cannot move. Therefore, we show this negative charge with a circle around it to show that it is bound, it cannot move. On the other hand, these are free electrons and they have moved to the interface, but they cannot move beyond interface into N region because there is an oxide layer in between. So they have all accumulated here at the interface. They are being drawn from the terminal here, right? So electric field is increasing. Now in addition to the ionized impurity charge, you also have free electrons accumulating here near the interface. Now this is called an inversion layer. This is called an inversion layer. Why? Because normally a p-type substrate will have more holes than electrons, but at the interface, because you have applied a field here in this direction, you are getting more electrons than holes. So the region is said to be inverted. From p-type it has become n-type in that small region. So this is why it is called an inversion layer. Now I want to use this inversion layer to pass a current between a contact on the left hand side and a contact on right hand side. That is why I have brought in two N plus regions, one on the left and other on the right. This N plus region also has a large number of electrons. Therefore, there is no contact resistance between this region and the inversion layer. This happens here as well as at this other end. Right now I have shown the two regions to be grounded for simplicity. Now this N plus P junction will have its depletion region here. That is why you can see that at the two ends you have depletion regions coming from these junctions. Now to pass the current, I should apply a voltage between this N plus and this N plus. Now before that, let us make this device more practical, because in practice you cannot just bring N plus regions like this from outside and stick it to the P region. In practice the picture would be like this. So in practice this N plus and this N plus region will be created out of this P region. Okay, so that is why it is shown like this now. So source and drain terminals are embedded in the substrate. Accordingly, the depletion region also has got modified here. Now you apply a voltage to this end as compared to this end, right? VDB. Now note here that B is bulk, this terminal, this is B. So we are applying a voltage with respect to bulk. Now the same thing can be considered as a voltage with respect to source also, because this terminal which is called the source is grounded. So voltage of this terminal is the same as voltage of this terminal. Now at this point I need to explain why this terminal is called a source and this terminal is called a drain. ID is a drain current. You can see now that if you concentrate on the electrons will move from this terminal to this terminal because this voltage is positive. Conventional current is from positive to negative, but electron flow is from negative to positive. So electrons are flowing from this terminal to this terminal. So we can say this terminal is sourcing electrons and this terminal is draining electrons. That is why this is called drain and this is called source. And this terminal is now called a gate, because by changing this voltage I can shut off the current flow or I can switch on the current flow. I can create inversion layer to create a current flow between drain and source by applying a suitable large voltage. If I remove the voltage, this inversion layer will vanish and the current also will vanish between drain and source. That is why this is called a gate. So when you apply this voltage, you will get a current that flows like this through the inversion layer. That is what is shown by this arrow. So arrow shows conventional current movement, whereas electron movement is in the opposite direction. Now supposing you apply a large drain voltage. Now what is going to happen is the charge conditions in the device will change as shown here. Now let us see why they change like this. You can see here that if I go along this line in the N plus polysilicon, voltage is constant, it is equal to VGB. VGB is voltage between gate and bulk. However, if I go along this line at the interface in the inversion layer, voltage is changing. Here the voltage is 0 as shown here, whereas here at this end the voltage is VDB. So this is positive. You can easily show based on this that the electric field from in the vertical direction is more near the source and less near the drain. Let us explain that here. So here the voltage is VGB, but since I applied a VDB and there is an inversion layer, voltage is going on changing. In other words, if I take this voltage and if I take this voltage is more than this voltage. Here at this end it is both are shorted. So what is this voltage? That is this voltage here in the slide. This is the built-in voltage, okay, because the shorted junction built-in voltage. Whereas here, so this I will say psi naught. Here I applied a VDB, so here it is psi naught plus VDB. This voltage is more. Now voltage between this and this is constant. This part of the voltage has increased, so this part of the voltage has reduced. So if I compare this voltage here and this voltage will be less than this voltage because total voltage is the same, equal to VGB. This part of the voltage is more, so this is reduced. So this field will be less than the field here, and if this field is less, then the amount of charge here also will be less as compared to this end. Now that is the reason why you can see here the inversion layer charge has reduced. The depletion layer however has increased, because this is like a reverse biased junction. This voltage is like reverse bias. This is positive and this is negative, psi naught plus VDB. So reverse bias will increase the depletion width, right, as compared to this here. But total charge has to reduce, so inversion charge will reduce. So that is why the picture is like this. Inversion charge less, even though depletion charge is more, but inversion charge plus depletion charge together is less than inversion charge plus depletion charge at this end, right, because this field in the vertical direction is less than this field. Okay, so that is how you get these charge conditions. Now what happens is, because the inversion charge has reduced at this end, for some VDB this charge will become 0, and once this has happened, even if you increase your VDB further, there is no change in the picture inside the MOSFET, almost no change, and therefore the current ID will saturate. So other words, we are saying if you plot as a function of VDB ID, that is this current as a function of this voltage, it will be like this, and beyond some point it will saturate beyond some VDB. So for a given VDB, ID increases with VGB. Now how to increase this current? If I change my VGB, I increase VGB further, this field will increase, and therefore the charge here will increase. Inversion charge is also going to increase. The current flowing from drain to source via the inversion charge is also going to increase. So if I plot another curve for increased VGB, it will look like this. This is increasing VGB. So you can explain these characteristics very easily now. This shows ID as a function of VD except that here we have used the symbol S, VDS. Why? Because VBS is 0. VBS means this source and this bulk, these two are shorted, right? Even on the previous slide, that is how it was shown. This bulk and this source, they are both shorted, okay? So VBS is 0. Once these are shorted, VDB is same as VDS. VDB is same as VDS because S and B are shorted. So it is ID versus VDS, VBS is 0, and then as a function of VGS. So as you increase your VGS, your current goes on increasing. Okay, that is what we have shown here. Here it was shown VGB, but B is same as S because bulk is shorted to source. Now someone had asked me a question in the first session. What happens if you change VBS? Now we can explain what happens if you change VBS. If you introduce a VBS with this polarity where the source is positive with respect to bulk, what is going to happen? So if I introduce a power supply here like this, right, what is going to happen? So what are you doing? By introducing a power supply, you are increasing this part of the voltage, right? But this voltage you are keeping same, total voltage. If you increase this part of the voltage, then this part of the voltage will reduce, right? So as we discussed earlier, if this part of the voltage reduces, this field will reduce and the inversion charge will reduce. So if I were to sketch ID VDB for a different VBS, let us say this was my VGB, or let us say this is the curve for VBS equal to 0. Then for this positive value of source voltage with respect to bulk, my current will be less and it will be like this. So this is VBS less than 0. So VBS is B with respect to S. There is negative. Please note that. Source is positive with respect to bulk, but bulk is negative with respect to source. So VBS less than 0, your current is going to decrease. You may ask, what happens if you change the polarity, right? Why not put like this? Now you will not try to put it like this because this is a p-type substrate. If you put a voltage with this polarity, P will become positive with respect to N, and there will be a large forward current like this, and this current cannot be controlled by gate. So your transistor operation will be affected, right? So you don't want that. So you only have a possibility of reverse biasing the source with respect to bulk. Okay, let me pause at this point and ask if there are any questions. So yes, we have MCKV again. Some questions there. The students are very attentive.
Hello? Yes, why do we use oxide layer as an insulating layer?
Why do we, now why not some other student also ask me some question. I forgot your name. What is your name?
Devaruti.
Devaruti. Someone other than Devaruti also can ask me. Okay, let me answer the question. Why do we use oxide as an insulator? Right, that was your question.
Yes.
Okay, actually you can use any insulator there. The important thing is you are depositing this insulator. This is the insulator. This is the substrate. And this is your gate, which is polysilicon. Now, this insulator should be deposited on the substrate. The important issue here is the interface quality should be good. If the interface is, for example, rough, or if the interface has many charges, because there is a disruption of the structure from one material to another material. So either roughness or charges here will affect what is called the mobility of the carriers at the interface. We have seen that the operation of the MOSFET depends on the inversion layer, which is right near the interface. So conduction is happening through the inversion layer. So mobility of the inversion layer is important. The mobility of electrons in inversion layer depends on the quality of interface. Rough interface or charges there, they reduce the mobility. So if the mobility is reduced, then you cannot get large amount of current. In fact, when people try to realize the MOSFET, we discussed the evolution of the semiconductor devices in the first session, and we said that the idea of MOSFET was proposed in 1930s, but the MOSFET was realized only in 1960. So what was the problem? The problem was with this interface. The interface was bad. They tried many things. They tried to deposit different types of insulators on silicon, but they found that the charges were not moving at all. So ultimately they came up with a very elegant and simple process, and they found that if you simply convert silicon to silicon dioxide by heating silicon in oxygen in a very clean ambient at 1000 degrees or more, then you get a very good quality insulator. Okay, that is why people use silicon dioxide, because it gives you a good interface and it gives you a reasonably good mobility of carriers there. Is that clear?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
So myself, Sudisha Ganguly.
Sudisha.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, please tell me, what is the doubt?
Sir, will you please explain the difference between enhancement and depletion type MOSFET?
Yes. Now we can explain based on our understanding of device so far. Let me go back on the slides. We started off like this with the PN junction, right? And we said there is a depletion region here. Okay? And then we introduced an oxide layer in between. Now you can see here, suppose I change a material here from N plus polysilicon to some other material, which gives me a very high built-in voltage between this material and this substrate. Then what will happen is this electric field will become really very large. And even when you do not apply a gate voltage, that is even under short circuit conditions, you can get an inversion layer here because this field is very high. So that inversion which we showed in the presence of VGB can happen even if you short this gate to bulk, provided you have appropriate material here which gives you a high built-in voltage, right, and a high field. So if this happens, now you see even without VGB you have an inversion layer. So if you now connect source and drain and then apply voltage, you will get a current even in the absence of VGB. So such a device is said to be depletion type device or normally on device. Depletion type or normally on. And the opposite type is the type we discussed first, that is enhancement type.
Yes, sir.
Or normally off. So why is, now you can easily understand why it is called normally on or normally off, right? So in the absence of VGB, even in the absence of VGB, if I get an inversion layer, it is normally on. If I need to apply VGB so that I get an inversion layer, then it is normally off. Now let us explain why it is called depletion or enhancement. So if it is a normally on device, by applying gate voltage you can reduce the current. Okay, already the current is large and you can reduce it. That is why it is, you can deplete the current. That is why it is called depletion type. By applying voltage you are trying to deplete the current. Now enhancement type, by applying the voltage you are trying to increase the inversion charge and increase the current, or you are trying to enhance the current by applying voltage, gate voltage. That is why that device is called enhancement type. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Whether the input resistance of a MOSFET is higher than JFET, yes, you are right, because a MOSFET has an oxide, right? A JFET, there is a reverse bias PN junction, but MOSFET has an oxide. So reverse bias PN junction has a leakage current, but leakage current in a junction in which you have oxide between P and N regions will be even smaller. Does the change in temperature change the carrier concentration? Yes, we have explained this in the very first session, right? That by changing temperature you can change carrier concentration, but it depends on the range. For example, supposing I take an N-type semiconductor and plot electron concentration versus temperature, N-type. The picture would be something like this. This one will be about 100 K, this one may be about say 500 K. So in this range, this is electron concentration in N-type semiconductor. So I am calling this as NN0. So in this range you can see 100 K to 500 K. Our room temperature is somewhere here. So around room temperature in N-type semiconductor, the electron concentration may not change much, but you know that semiconductors have both electrons and holes. If you take the hole concentration in N-type semiconductor, it will change a lot with temperature. The formula for hole concentration is Pn0 is equal to Ni square by Nn0. So Nn0 is not changing with temperature in this range, but Ni square changes rapidly with temperature, and that we have explained how the carrier concentration of an intrinsic semiconductor changes with temperature. So Pn0 changes a lot with temperature. In general, minority carrier concentration changes drastically with temperature, but majority carrier concentration does not change around room temperature, right, for most of the practical semiconductors. Yes, MCKV again.
Hello sir, good afternoon.
Yes, please introduce yourself.
I am Ohana Dotto from MCKV.
Ohana Dotto, right.
Ohana.
Yes. Tell me.
Sir, can you tell me about CMOS, I mean complementary MOS, a little bit explanation please.
Yes. Now this MOSFET that I showed you on the slide, you can see the slide. This is called N-channel MOSFET because the current is passing through an inversion layer which is made of electrons. Now evidently I can simply change the polarity of all the semiconductors here. I can change this N plus to P, this P substrate to N, and I can create an inversion layer of holes. That would be a P channel MOSFET. If you put an N channel and a P channel MOSFET together in a circuit, such a circuit is called complementary MOS. Okay. Now why would you like to put an N channel and P channel transistors together? Let us see that. Now the basic unit of a digital circuit is an inverter. How can you make an inverter in a simple way? This is an example. Suppose this is a positive power supply and this is a control switch. This is your input. Now when I switch this on, this point will come to 0 because the switch is a short circuit. Output will become 0. Suppose this is input. So when input is high, output is low. When I make the input high, this switch will switch on. If I have an arrangement like this, it is an inverter because input is high, output is low. If input is low, then the switch is off. Then output will go to this voltage because this is turned off, this is removed. Output will be high. So input is low, output is high. This is an inverter. How do you build an inverter? So one example is you can use a MOSFET here. Some student asked, where is the MOSFET used? Now I am giving you a practical example, real example. I can use a MOSFET here. By changing the voltage of this gate, I can create an inversion layer and I can create a short circuit from here to here. Okay. So this is an inverter. Now this is an N-channel device. First I have used an N-channel device. I can replace this resistance by another MOSFET, and that would be a P-channel device, and I can use the combination of this two gates as an input and here I will get the output. I can easily show that I will get a similar kind of behavior, input to output, in this combination. This is a P channel and this is an N channel. Now what is the advantage of replacing the resistor with a P channel? You can do some calculations and you will find that it occupies a smaller area in an integrated circuit to actually make a MOSFET. So the appropriate MOSFET that you can use here is P channel. Why not use N channel? Well, there are circuits available in which you can create the resistance out of an N channel device. But the advantage of P channel is the following. When this device is on, this is off, this is complementary. So if I short this input, this device will be on and the output will go to this. And if I connect it to positive voltage, that is if it is high, input is high, then this device will be on and you will get 0. The advantage of this, so here what is happening is, depending on the voltage, any one device is off. So when one is on, the other is off. As against this, if you put a resistor here, the problem is when this is high, this is on, but the resistor is also on, right? Resistor is on. It allows a current. Therefore, the output voltage will depend on ratio of this resistance to this resistance. Unless this resistance is really small compared to this, your output will not come to very low value, 0. Whereas if you replace it by P channel MOSFET, output will come to 0 because the P channel MOSFET is off. It has an infinite resistance. That's the advantage of complementary MOS. It allows you to achieve the output between maximum positive voltage and 0 volts. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Why depletion width is narrow at source in JFET? Well, the reason is same as in MOSFET. Now, let us look at the MOSFET. Here also depletion width is less near the source because the voltage across this region is small near the source. Here the voltage is more, right? At the drain, the voltage drop across the depletion layer is more. Charge carriers in the channel, where does it come from? Good question. These carriers, where do they come from? So they come, it depends on your circuit. Suppose you are looking at this channel, where are the carriers coming from? They come from the bulk substrate. On the other hand, if I connect source and drain like this, then it will be easier to get this electrons from the source. So when source is connected, then the carriers come from source. But if source is not there, as in this case, then carriers come from the bulk terminal. Okay? If the source is connected, they come from the source terminal. CKKL, tell me, what is the question?
Why is it called as a small signal?
Which one? A transistor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, a transistor is not called a small signal, is it? No. No. I think maybe you are asking me, why do we talk about small signal amplification? No, you can amplify DC signals, you can amplify small signals, right? In practice, most of the cases we need to amplify small signals. Why? Suppose I want to amplify my voice, right? I want to amplify my voice. Now, what is the method used? First, sound energy will be converted into electrical energy in a microphone. Now, what is sound energy? It is nothing but variation of, what is sound energy? Can you tell me? Okay, how will a sound signal converted to electrical signal, how will it be as a function of time? So it will be some varying voltage with time. Output of a microphone will be a time varying voltage, right? So a voltage which is varying with time and its magnitude will be very small. Have you ever thought what is the output of a microphone? How much voltage is it? You will find it is of the order of micro to millivolts, and you will have to amplify that voltage. So I have taken an example of amplification of sound, our own voice. So here the signal that is coming out is varying with time and it is small. That is why it is called a small signal voltage. Now a thing that is varying with time is called signal. and if the magnitude is small, it is called small signal. So the output of a microphone is a small signal voltage, right? Like that, in different situations you will find you need to amplify small signals which are obtained by converting from some other energy to electrical energy. That is why, since you are using a transistor for that purpose, we are talking about small signal amplification. Is that clear? Now let me tell you quickly little bit about energy band diagrams. So there are these 4 levels you must have come across: EV, EI, EC and E0. Let us see what these levels mean. E0 is the energy of an electron outside the semiconductor but touching its surface. EC is the potential energy of a conduction electron, that is an electron inside the semiconductor which is free to move everywhere. EV is the potential energy of a hole. Now the energy required to move an electron out of a semiconductor, how much is it? If you are moving an electron from a free electron out of a semiconductor, then energy required is difference of E0 and EC. On the other hand, if you are removing a bound electron which is taking part in silicon-silicon bonding, then the difference is EV and E0 minus EV. What is the energy difference in generation and recombination? So generation, an electron jumps from valence to conduction band. Energy is EC minus EV. Even in the recombination, energy is EC minus EV, except that the electron jumps from conduction to valence band. How do you represent an electron in random thermal motion under equilibrium? So an electron in random thermal motion, you know that it has some velocity, right? That is called the thermal velocity, 10 power 7 centimeters per second at 300 K in silicon. Therefore it has a kinetic energy. So how do you show such an electron on energy band diagram? So the difference between this energy of this electron from EC, this difference is the kinetic energy, okay? And similarly, if you want to show a hole which is having kinetic energy, as the hole gains kinetic energy, it moves down in the energy band diagram. In energy band diagram, increasing electronic energies are shown upwards and decreasing electronic energies or increasing hole energies or increasing positive energies are shown downward. So as the hole gains kinetic energy, it moves down in energy band diagram. As electron gains kinetic energy, it moves up. So this difference is the kinetic energy of the electron. Difference of the energy of the electron from EC is the kinetic energy of a conduction electron, and this is the kinetic energy of a hole. N-type semiconductor, you show an additional level called Fermi level and what is called a donor level. This is the energy level corresponding to the donor impurity. The difference between EC and ED is the energy required to ionize a donor impurity. In a p-type semiconductor, you have acceptor impurities. So energy level corresponding to this acceptor impurity is such that the difference EA minus EV tells you how much energy is required to ionize the acceptor. In other words, an electron should in the valence band should have that much energy to reach this acceptor level, and Fermi level in a p-type semiconductor is below the intrinsic level. Now if you add n-type impurities in addition to p-type impurities, if the number of n-type impurities or donor impurities is small, then your semiconductor is still p-type, but its p-type nature has reduced, therefore Fermi level has moved closer to EI. If you increase the number of donors and make it more than number of acceptors, as shown here, the positive signs more than negative signs, then the semiconductor becomes n-type and Fermi level will move on above the EI. Now features and utility of energy band diagrams. Where do we use energy band diagram? Now you would have seen so far in my explanation of all the devices, I have never used any energy band diagram, okay? Why is it so? Because we were discussing only homojunctions, junction between p and n-type material made of the same semiconductor. In such a case, electrons move from n silicon where their concentration is large to p silicon where their concentration is low. So you can predict about various phenomena in this device based on concentrations of carriers. However, supposing you take a situation like this, you are joining a p-type silicon and let us say metal. So you replace the n-type silicon by a metal here. This is a heterojunction because the two sides of the junction are different materials. Now what happens? When p silicon and metal are brought into contact, we cannot determine the direction of electron transfer without the help of energy band diagram. So we cannot simply say metal has more electrons than p-type silicon. Therefore, when you join metal to p-type silicon, electrons will move from metal to p-type silicon to create the space charge layer, right? Because it is not correct to go by concentration alone. Now this is where we need energy band diagram, because we need to realize, we need to understand which side carriers have a higher energy. It is possible to have higher concentration but lower energy if your material is different. This can be shown with an energy band diagram, that electrons may move from p-type silicon to metal, that is from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration. So you want to understand or appreciate this, you have to go to the energy band diagram. Suppose this is p-type silicon and this is metal. Now for a metal we do not show conduction and valence bands. For p-type silicon you do show conduction and valence bands, so EC and EV, and your Fermi level. So as we have said, for p-type silicon it is below, this is EF. Now metal Fermi level, where will it be? So normally you use E0 as a reference to show the Fermi levels. This difference is normally called work function. So you need to know the work function of the metal, right? And suppose your metal is such that this work function is more and your Fermi level is therefore here in metal. Now when you join p-type silicon and metal, the electrons will move from regions of higher Fermi level to lower Fermi level. So your electrons are moving like this. If you try to predict this transfer of electrons based on concentration, you will come to a conclusion that metal has high concentration of electrons, p-type silicon has low concentration of electrons, so electrons will move from metal to p-type silicon, but that is wrong, because energy band diagram tells you that p-type silicon will supply electrons to metal. Now you will say, so why not use energy band diagram for a homojunction also? That is the first case. Well, you can use, and the result will be whatever you predict from concentration. So if I were to replace this by n-type silicon, then your picture will be as follows. N-type silicon Fermi level is higher than EI. Okay, so difference between E0 and EC on both sides will be the same because both are silicon, right? And now that is why this Fermi level will be higher, and here the charge transfer will be from N to P. So whatever you try to predict from energy band diagram, same thing you can predict from concentration also if it is a homojunction. Both sides material are same, right? If both sides of the junction have different materials, you have to use energy band diagram. So energy band diagram is a more general approach which works for all different material junctions between all different materials, and that is why one must use energy band, learn to use energy band diagrams. Now let me quickly just show you the equations that are used for device analysis. Normally we use 6 equations, but these 6 equations are related to the 3 types of flows, that is flow of electrons, flow of holes, and the electric field, which can also be regarded as a flow because all these can be represented using lines. So for each these flows you have 2 equations, one that talks about creation of the flow and second which talks about conservation of lines or particles in the flow. So creation, these equations are equations which tell you the cause of the flow. For example, this equation tells you that the electron current density could be due to gradient of electrons or electric field, diffusion or drift. Similarly, the hole current density could be due to hole diffusion and drift. Similarly, here the electric field is due to gradient of potential. So it is a cause effect relation. The continuity equation tells you how the carriers will be conserved during flow. What are all the mechanisms or phenomena which are active simultaneously and they will result in carrier conservation. So you have one continuity equation for electrons and another one for holes. I will not spend my time in discussing these equations in detail. You can always read up in the books, because our idea in these sessions is to introduce you to some of the ideas so that you can then read up things on your own. So here let me tell you the terms. Left hand side is variation of electron concentration with time. This variation can be contributed by current flow into a region, or generation within a region, or recombination within a region. Okay, that is what is the continuity equation. So what we are saying here is, if I have any region of semiconductor, in this region the electron concentration can go on increasing if there is input of electrons from outside, or there is generation inside electron hole pairs, and it will decrease if there is recombination. So these three mechanisms are what are reflected here in the three terms of the right hand side equation. Three right hand side terms of this equation. Okay. Similarly for holes. Similarly, the electric field, also there is a continuity equation. It says that electric field lines are caused by space charge. These equations for Jn and Jp are called transport equations, and these two equations are called electrostatic equations. Now these transport equations can be further classified into current density equations. These two are called current density equations, and these are called continuity equations. Okay. So normally this equation is called Gauss's law, so it is also a continuity equation, the equation for the electric field. Now if you can solve for these current densities, then you can calculate the current by integrating the current density over contact area. That is what is shown here, and total current is the sum of the electron current and hole current, which are given here, right? And how do you get the voltage between two terminals? So suppose this is the device which you want to analyze, and you want to get what is the current for a given voltage. So you have analyzed the device, you know what is the potential variation inside, something like this, psi versus x. The potential is more on the left hand side because it is positive. Some psi versus x you have got, and you also got the current density. Then by integrating the current density over the area, you get this current, and by integrating the potential over distance, I am sorry, you have the field. By integrating the field, so the field may be something like this. So this is E versus x. So by integrating this field, you get the potential. The E versus x should actually be shown. E is d psi by dx. So here psi versus x, d psi by dx is negative. Your equation is E equal to minus d psi by dx. And if you try to integrate, so E dx is equal to minus d psi, or minus E dx d psi. Then you integrate this. So you get the potential from the integration of the electric field. That is what is shown here. Instead of x, I have put L here as a line. Psi is minus integral E dot dl. So the field may be something like this. Okay, when you integrate this field, you get the potential, and when you take the difference in these two potentials, you get the applied voltage. So that is how, based on the internal picture of the device, that is current density and electric field, you can get the current versus voltage characteristics. Now there are too many equations and too many terms in the equations. Normally in any given situation, all terms will not be present. So we make a lot of approximations and simplify these equations. Some of the approximations are shown here. Under equilibrium, Jn and Jp, these two left hand side terms become 0. G here becomes 0 in continuity equation, delta n and delta p, excess carrier concentration, also becomes 0. So you can see that continuity equations need not be used at all in equilibrium, and these equations, the left hand side is 0. So that is how simplifications happen. Steady state, in this situation, these two left hand side terms will become 0. Okay, dou n by dou t and dou p by dou t. There will be no variation of quantities with time. So that is how the situation gets simplified. Charge neutrality. Suppose some region is charge neutral, it means the space charge here rho is 0. Okay, and delta n is equal to delta p. Diffusion approximation. It means that, let us say if you are doing it for electrons, this diffusion current alone matters and there is no drift. So you are dropping off this drift term. Depletion approximation in the space charge region of a p-n junction. When you do that, you are assuming that the space charge is only due to ionized impurities. Then you have gradual channel approximation and charge sheet approximations. We will not discuss these because it will require a little bit of lengthy explanation. All that it means is this Gauss law may have to be solved in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions, in which case you will have a term varying with x, with y and with z. Now in the 2-dimensional situation, you can assume one of the gradients to be much more than the other. The dou E by dou x is much more than dou E by dou y. That is how you can drop off terms on the left hand side of Gauss law. That is gradual channel approximation. Let us take the example of the ideal diode model. It is given by this equation, I equal to Is exponential V by Vt minus 1, where Is in terms of the parameters of the device or material is given here. So this is Q is the electronic charge, Ni is the intrinsic concentration, Dn is the diffusion coefficient of electrons on p side, tau n is the lifetime of electrons on p side, Na is a doping of the p side. Similarly, you have corresponding terms on the n side. Please remember, the suffix n is not the p type region. This suffix n refers to the electrons, right? And these are referring to the minority carriers. Okay. Therefore, we should not think that Dn means diffusion coefficient of electrons on the n side. That will not be correct. Dn is diffusion coefficient of electrons, but it is on the p side. This is clear from the denominator term Na. Na means p side doping, and therefore these quantities are also for p side. Similarly, this is for n side. A is the area of the diode, area of cross section, that is this area. So if this is a diode Pn, then this area is A. Now supposing we have written an equation like this, how do we check whether what we have written is correct? So let me give an example of a mistake that may be done while writing the equation, and then how will we check that we have made a mistake. So many times when students are asked to write the equation for diode, they will only remember the forward bias. So they will not put the term 1 here, right? This one will be missing, and they will write the equation as I equal to Is exponential V by Vt. Now suppose we write an equation like this, and then we want to check is it right. How do we check? Supposing I put V equal to 0. So what we should do is we should check the equation for limiting cases. We can confirm whether a model equation is correct or not by checking if the units of the right hand side of the equation match with those on the left hand side. Okay, even before we go to the limits, first we should check the units. Now let us check. I have written a lengthy formula for Is. Did I forget some terms here? How do I know? So the way to do it is, let us check the units first. So let us write down the units of the right hand side here. So Is is equal to Q into Ni square into square root dn by tau n by Na plus square root dp by tau p by nd into area. That is what we have written. Now whenever we write a lengthy equation like this, we are likely to forget some terms. For example, I could make a mistake. I may write this as Ni alone instead of Ni square, right? Now how do I know whether I have done a mistake? So let us put the units. Is, the unit should be amperes, you know that. So the right hand side units should turn out to be amperes. Now let me put the units. Q is coulomb, Ni is per centimeter cube. Then I go inside the bracket, dn is centimeter square per second and tau n is seconds, and this is square root by doping, this is per centimeter cube. Now this will have the same units, so I am not writing these units separately because as far as units are concerned this is the same. So A is centimeter square. Okay, now centimeter square by second square, square root. So the square term will vanish and this is what it will be. Centimeter to the power minus 3 and there is centimeter to the power 3 here, both in denominator, so I can cancel these two. Now coulomb per second, let me push this second here because I know coulomb per second is amperes. But now I am left with some more terms. I want only amperes on the right hand side, but I am left with centimeter and centimeter square. When I multiply these two, I will get centimeter cube. So I am left with a centimeter cube term on the right hand side, right? So I know that I have made a mistake. I can also know what kind of mistake I have done because I need to cancel this term. The only way I can cancel this term is I should get another centimeter cube in the denominator per centimeter cube, and then if I know a little bit about semiconductor devices, then I know that the only term here which can give me centimeter cube is a concentration term, right? So then I realize, oh, I have forgotten to square this. If I square it, then I will get a centimeter term and then all this will cancel, I will get amperes, right? So that is how we can check. I will leave it to you as an assignment to check what will happen if, for example, I don't put square root here, right? I forget to put square root. Now I will let you write the units for this case and you will find that left hand side units will not match right side units, right? Okay, so that is one of the ways to check. So whenever you write a model equation, you must check it using units. Next level of check is the current I predicted for limiting values of voltages V, such as V equal to 0, plus infinity and minus infinity, should be physical. You must get physical values for these voltages. Now supposing I have checked the units and I have no problem with the units, so I have written this equation like this. Is is this and I equal to Is exponential V by Vt. Now no problem with units. Here equation is correct unit wise, even here it is correct. But then still there can be a mistake where I might have forgotten to put some terms of the same units or constant terms. How do I check that? So let us check this equation for limiting cases. Supposing I put V equal to 0, I should get 0 current. This is one of the checks we should do with all current voltage equations. If I put V equal to 0, I will get exponential of 0, that is 1. I will get I equal to Is, but the current should be actually 0. If you don't apply a voltage to a device, there should be no current through the device, right? So I know that I have made a mistake here. It is not correct. For V equal to 0, this is unphysical. Then it strikes me immediately, what should I do? So V equal to 0, I am getting I equal to Is, but I should get 0, so I must subtract Is. If I subtract Is, then when I put V equal to 0, this Is minus Is, I will get 0, right? And then it strikes me, yes, I have forgotten this one. So this is the way we can check model equations, and we must check. Now let us make some calculations and see what precautions we should take while making calculations. Let us again take this diode model for calculation. Suppose the question is, calculate the current I in a small signal silicon diode with the following parameters. So parameters will be given now. For V equal to 0.26 volts, there is a forward bias of 0.26 volts, and T equal to 300 K room temperature using this model. Now these are the parameters. Area of the diode is 1 millimeter square. P region doping is 10 power 17 per centimeter cube. Diffusion coefficient is 18 centimeter square per second, and lifetime of electrons is 100 nanoseconds. In region, doping is 10 power 15. Diffusion coefficient is 13 centimeter square per second, and tau p is 1 microsecond. And you know that Ni at 300 K is 1.5 into 10 power 10 per centimeter cube. So let us calculate the current I. Now how do we put all these things? So first I need to calculate, so let me put the equation I equal to Is exponential of V by Vt minus 1. V is 0.26 volts. Since temperature is 300 K, Vt is 0.026 volts. So if I substitute these values here, I will get I equal to Is the exponential of 0.26 volts by 0.026 volts. So since numerator and denominator are the same units, I am not putting the units. Now please note, students always forget to put units, okay. So it is not a good idea. It is always good to put units there and then cancel them. I will now show you how this becomes important for other calculations. So 0.26 by 0.026. So this will be 26 by 0.026. So this will be 10. So your answer first level is e power 10 minus 1. Now you know that e power 10 will be much more than 1. So we should actually make approximations. See, we should not forget to put some terms, but after putting all the terms, we need not use all the terms. Every engineer should learn to approximate so that it should make matter simple. An engineer should know how to make things simple. So now after putting all the terms, I know this term is not important. So I am going to say this is equal to Is exponential of 10. Now I need to find out what is Is. Then I would have solved the problem. The Is calculation is a little bit more involved. So Is is equal to Q Ni square, I am repeating that, into square root dn by tau n by Na plus square root dp by tau p by nd into A. Now I need to put the values of various terms. Now when I put the values, I should follow the following procedure, right? Let's start with Q. So Q is 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 coulombs. So I will give sufficient space here to put all the numbers and then put the units on the side here. So let me put coulombs here, okay. So value and the units. I can even make one more thing, and that is I can separate out the constant and the powers, right? That way my calculations, chances of making mistake in calculations is reduced. So let me show you how I can do that. So I will put the power here, 10 power 19. So I will leave sufficient space and I will put the units here and the power here. So 1.6 into 10 power 19 coulombs. Now let me come to Ni square. Ni is given as 1.5 into 10 power 10. That is what is given here, 1.5 into 10 power 10. So when I square it, I will get 1.5 square into 10 power 10 square, which is 10 power 20. So I put the power here of Ni square. and unit here. Ni square is centimeter to the power 6 in the denominator. Okay, now I enter inside. Square root of dn by tau n. Dn is given as 18 centimeter square per second and tau n is given as 100 nanoseconds. So maybe I can do that calculation separately. Here dn by tau n is equal to 18 centimeter square per second divided by 100 nanoseconds. So 100 into 10 power minus 9 seconds. So square root is square root of this and square root of this. So this works out to, now 100 in 10 power minus 9 is 10 power minus 7. Now 10 power minus 7, 18 by 10 power minus 7. So that is equal to square root 18 into 10 power 7. And here it is centimeter per second. Now when I take the square root of this, what I can do is I can make it an even number here. Maybe I can make it say 1.8 into 10 power 8, and so square root will be square root 1.8 into 10 power 4 centimeters per second. Okay, now I can put this term here. So square root 1.8 into 10 power 4. So that 10 power 4 now I can move out here. Okay, divided by Na. Now Na is given as, let us look at it here, 10 power 17 per centimeter cube. So denominator has to be 10 power 17 plus, similarly I need to calculate dP by tau p. So let us make a calculation for dP by tau p. So this is dP, this is tau p. Now dP is given as 13, so 18 is replaced by 3, 13. Tau p is given here, it is 1 microsecond. So 1 into 10 power minus 6 seconds. So this part remains the same. So this is 13 into 10 power 6, and if I take a square root, it will be square root 13 into 10 power 3. So I will put it here. Here I get square root 13 into 10 power 3. Now I have moved out 10 power 4, right, out of the bracket. Therefore inside I should divide it by 10, because this also, this is 10 power 3 into 10 power 3. So since I have taken out 10 power 4, this I have to divide by 10. And Nd, let us take Nd. Nd is 10 power 15. So here into 10 power 15. Now when I put 10 power, now I have to put units corresponding to this. I have forgotten to put units, that's not correct. So unit of this is centimeter per second. So I put here centimeter per second. And unit of this is per centimeter cube. So per centimeter cube. The same units apply to this, so I am not putting them separately. Okay. Now I am left with A, area. Now area is given as 1 millimeter square here. So I multiply it by 1. So my constants are all here. So multiply it by 1 and millimeter square. So I should convert to centimeter square because I am using centimeters everywhere. So 1 millimeter square is 10 power minus 2 centimeter square. So I put centimeter square there. Now this is the quantity I need to calculate. Let us check whether we have put all the terms. So this is our IS. How do I check? So I should check the units here. Now you can see that centimeter into centimeter square is centimeter cube and this is per centimeter cube. I can shift this up, it will become centimeter power 6 if I club these, so that will cancel with this. And coulomb per second is amperes, that is what should be the unit of IS. So whatever value I get here will be in amperes, okay. So this is amperes. Now this A is area whereas this is amperes, so I want to distinguish. Okay, so all the terms have been put. Now let us calculate this order. Now if I take this, I will get the order of the current, okay. Then I can multiply it by this coefficient. What is the order? 19 plus 20 plus 4 minus 2. Now I have done a mistake here, you can see, because when I add this, you know what I will get? 19 plus 20 is 38 or 39 plus 4. 39 plus 4 is 43 minus 2 41. I am going to get 10 power 41 amperes. Now can you get IS of that order? You know that small signal diode currents are milliamperes and already I have a factor of 10 e power 10 here. So IS should be really very very small, but I am getting 10 power 40. So I made a mistake. Let us check where did I make a mistake. So first of all, when I put Q, it should be 1.6 into 10 power minus 19 coulombs. So I have forgotten. Then Ni square 10 power 20. Yes, that is fine. I have not taken into account this 10 power 17 or 10 power 16 yet. Okay. So I need to take this also into account. You can see here, if I push this, so this is 10 power 16. Now if I want to make it, I can make it 10 power 17 by putting a 10 here, so that both will be of the same order. 10 power 17, 10 power 17. Now I can shift this 10 power 17 out, which means there will be a minus 17 here. So now let us see the order. Minus 19 and this is another minus 19, minus 2 minus 17, minus 38 plus 20 plus 4. So minus 38 plus 24. So this will be minus 14, right? So this whole quantity is minus 14. So I get 10 power minus 14 here, amperes, this part alone, and multiply. So that is the order I am getting. Now I can again check, is this fine? So I have to find out what is e power 10. So how much is e power 10? Let us see that. It is about 2.2 into 10 power 4 IS. So I am getting a 10 power 4 order here. So minus 14, and when you add 4, you will get minus 10. Now you know 10 power minus 9 is nanoamperes. So you are getting currents of the order of nanoamperes, which may be alright. Let us proceed with the calculation further. Now here I can see that this 10 into root 13 will be much more than root 1.8. So I really don't have to bother about this. I can neglect this. As I said, engineers should approximate. In fact, so this is clear, when any one side doping is more, the terms corresponding to that side will be small, right? So 1.6 into 1.5 square is 2.25 into 10 into root 13 into 10 power minus 14. So this 10 I will take here and this will become 10 power minus 13. Now 1.6 into 2.25 into square root 13. Please calculate, all of you, with your calculator and see how much it is. So this whole thing is about 13 and therefore this answer is 1.3. So 13 in 10 power minus 13, I can put 1.3 and make it minus 12, because I know minus 12, 10 power minus 12 is picoamps. So 1.3 picoamps. So your reverse saturation current is of the order of picoamps. This is a fairly common value, right? So I know that I am right. So IS is 1.3 picoamps. At least my order is correct. So now I can find out how much is this, 2.2 in 10 power 4. So 2.2 into 1.3 into 10 power minus 12 plus 4. So many amperes. So this is, I can take 13, 13 twos are 26, I have 2 left, 13 to 26, 28, 2.86 into 10 power minus 8 amperes. Now we know that 10 power minus 9 is nanoamperes, therefore we can write this as 28.6 nanoamperes. This is what is my answer, right? 28.6 nanoamperes. So that is the current. In fact, I will be also justified if I just write it as 29 nanoamperes. You can round it off, okay? But please do not put some 4 or 5 decimal places beyond this. Many times students put this kind of numbers here and they make no sense, because can you really ever measure such small currents, right? So you must be aware of how many terms are significant. So 1 decimal place is sufficient, okay? You should round off. Now this should tell you how you should make calculations. So let us summarize what are the important things that we must take care of in calculations. So while putting the value of any physical parameter in the equation, always include the units as well. So you can see that whenever we put the parameter here, we put the units, the value and the units. Collect the powers of 10 together and evaluate them separately from the multiplying constants. So we have put the powers of 10 separate and multiplying constants separate, right? Be aware of the order of magnitudes of physical parameters, voltages and expected current. So you see, I had made a mistake while putting the value of Q charge. Instead of minus 19, I put plus 19 here, and I got a horribly wrong order of magnitude of current, because I know that for a small signal diode, current should be of the order of nanoamperes, microamperes or milliamperes, right? That is the order of current I should get. I can't get order of 10 power 40 amperes. That is the wrong answer. So that is what is said here. You should be aware of order of magnitudes of physical parameters, voltages and expected current. So here, because I was aware of the magnitude of the expected current here, right, I knew that I made a mistake here. I could locate the mistake. Now similarly, you may make a mistake in writing the values of parameters, right, and that also you should be able to detect. For example, if I get lifetime in seconds, by mistake I have put lifetime in seconds, that is wrong. You know, lifetime should be of the order of some tens or hundreds of nanoseconds to tens of microseconds. That is the range. So this is what is meant, that I must know. I cannot put doping of 10 power 25 per centimeter cube. That kind of doping levels you don't get in practice. So you can't make such mistakes, right? You can't put area of the diode as 10 centimeter square. Please remember, 10 centimeter square diode, how much is that? Area 10 centimeter square. This is 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. This is really a big diode. I do not know how many of you have seen a diode of this size. So we should be aware of the realistic values of quantities. Okay. So with that, we have come to the end of our session. I thank all of you for sitting through this 6 to 7 hours of 3 sessions, and I hope that this would have created some interest in devices. I have already given you the video lectures which are available on internet. So you can peacefully sit at home, log on to the internet, and whenever you have time, you can look at these lectures, right, which are available.